They had met in college, fallen in love in their early 20s, and now, in their 30s, had settled into a comfortable rhythm. They owned a home in the suburbs, had a dog named Charlie, and lived a life that many people envied. But over the past few months, Mark had sensed something different about Lisa. She was distant, more preoccupied with her phone, and frequently out late with friends from work. At first, he chalked it up to stress or perhaps a temporary phase. Lisa had always been the more social of the two, while Mark was more reserved. He never questioned her autonomy or the relationships she had outside of their marriage. But the unease grew, and soon it was impossible to ignore. One evening, after Lisa had gone out with her friends, Mark stayed home, lying in bed and thinking about everything that had seemed off lately. He decided to check her phone, something he had never done before. At first, his heart pounded in his chest as he unlocked it using the code he had long since memorized. He didn't know what he was expecting, but he didn't expect to find the text messages. There, in black and white, were messages from a man named David, someone Mark had never heard of. The texts were flirty at first, harmless in appearance, but as the conversation progressed, they grew more intimate. There were late-night messages and photos of Lisa, smiling at some event Mark had never been invited to. As he scrolled down, the last message chilled him to the bone. "I can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you." Mark's breath caught in his throat. His stomach twisted into a knot. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. His wife had been having an affair. The next few hours were a blur. He didn't sleep. Instead, he replayed every moment in their marriage, trying to make sense of the signs he had missed. Why hadn't he noticed the subtle changes? The lack of interest in their conversations? The way she avoided his touch? The realization was suffocating. The next morning, when Lisa came home, she seemed oblivious to the storm Mark had gone through the night before. Her hair was a bit messier than usual, and she had a certain glow to her that didn't sit right with him. When she kissed him on the cheek, he barely flinched. "Good morning," she said cheerfully, hanging up her coat. Mark stayed silent for a long moment before he finally spoke. His voice was steady, though the hurt behind it was clear. "Who's David's?" Lisa froze, a small flicker of panic crossing her face before she quickly masked it with a calm expression. "What do you mean?" I found the texts," he said, holding up the phone. "The ones where you tell him you miss him." Lisa's face went pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Mark's hands shook as he handed her the phone. She stared at the screen, her eyes glossing over the messages that exposed the affair she had tried so desperately to keep hidden. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they didn't seem to come from regret, more like a mixture of guilt and fear. She set the phone down slowly and looked at Mark. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but the words felt empty, too late.
Mark didn't know what to say.
The pain in his chest was overwhelming. They had built a life together, and yet, in a few words, it had all crumbled. "I never meant to hurt you," Lisa continued, her voice trembling. I don't know what happened. It wasn't planned. It just had happened." Mark couldn't bring himself to respond. What was there to say? The trust had been shattered beyond repair. With a heavy heart, Mark turned and walked out of the room, leaving Lisa behind, alone with the weight of her betrayal. In the weeks that followed, Mark and Lisa tried to talk, but the damage was done. Mark couldn't forget the image of his wife's betrayal, and Lisa couldn't undo the choices she had made. Their marriage, once a symbol of love and partnership, had fractured in a way that left both of them questioning who they were and whether they could ever find their way back to what they once had.